After days of denials, confirmation at last. The PM is scrapping HS2 to Manchester.
I say to those who backed the project in the first place, the facts have changed. And the right thing to do when the facts change is to have the courage to change direction.
Addressing the Tory party conference, Mr Sunak announced the end of what he called the long-running saga of the high-speed rail link. For local leaders, though, this comes as a bitter blow.
Why do people, often from other parts of the country, think they can treat this part of the world as though it's second best and the people here as though they're second-class citizens?
Well, instead, the PM's promising Network North, a multi-billion-pound package of transport investment. But will that make up for what's being lost to the north? Good evening. The Prime Minister today declared an end to what he called the long-running saga of HS2's northern leg, saying the facts have changed and that he was scrapping the route. The decision, announced at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, means the city will no longer see new high-speed rail connections to Birmingham. And despite Rishi Sunak's promise to reinvest every single penny saved, there has been furious political and business reaction tonight. Even the former Tory PM, David Cameron, called the decision wrong.
So then it came, expected but still shocking, an extraordinary U-turn.
I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project.
How on earth does he justify that?
And in its place, we will reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. The decision I've made and the stance I'm taking will be attacked. They will say that halting it signals a lack of ambition, but there is nothing ambitious about simply pouring more and more money into the wrong project.
Ahead of a general election, it's quite risky.
Well, look, this is not about being popular. This is about doing the right thing for the long-term prosperity and health of this country.
It's not just what Westminster wants, it's what the people of the country want.
The former Tory Prime Minister David Cameron said the decision on HS2 was the wrong one, and he said that future generations would look back and wonder how this once-in-a-generation opportunity was lost.
Well, the decision to truncate HS2 comes alongside a pledge to reroute tens of billions of pounds into other transport schemes. So where exactly will that money go, and how did the project's budget get so big in the first place? Well, our economics editor Joel Hills is here. I mean, the figures are eye-watering, aren't they?
They are, and high speed too, let's remember, was supposed, Mary, to drive economic growth and transform rail travel. We were told trains would hurtle between 18 cities at speeds of more than 200 miles an hour, bringing 2/3 of everyone living in northern England within 2 hours of central London. But delays mounted and costs spiralled from £32 billion in 2012 to approaching £100 billion today, according to some estimates. The fact it's so unclear is part of the problem. The average household in Britain was set to pay £2,300 in tax each to build HS2 over the next 20 years. So what went wrong? Well, mismanagement has been a problem, not least at the Euston Station site. There were delays in local planning consent. The soil between London and Birmingham turned out to be softer than expected, holding up tunnelling. Land was more expensive to buy than had been anticipated, and the pandemic and the war in Ukraine have inflated the price of labour and raw materials. Now, this was the original route that HS2 was supposed to take when Parliament approved it back in 2012. Boris Johnson ditched the section to Leeds 2 years ago. Today, Rishi Sunak has scrapped everything north of Birmingham. He's replacing it with his Network North. £36 billion of HS2 money will instead be spent improving road, rail and bus connections in the North and the Midlands. A further £12 billion is pledged to deliver faster links between Liverpool and Manchester. The government has published hundreds of projects this afternoon, but they read a bit like a shopping list. It's not yet clear how many have permission to start, when they'll be delivered or how many jobs they will create. The thinking, though, is smaller is better.
Spending money on smaller, less risky projects can produce much better rates of benefit per pound spent than on one enormous project like HS2, which gobbles up a lot of money and has controversial benefits.
HS2 is not dead, just very, very diminished. The route here between London and Birmingham is being built. It has cost £30 billion so far. That's already £10 billion over the original budget. And trains won't start running for another 6 years at the earliest. Now, back in 2012, the idea was that every pound the government spent on HS2 would deliver £2.30 of economic benefits. Now, Mary, the government says the returns could be as low as 80 pence.
OK, Joel Hills, thank you. Well, across the north of England, there was both frustration and disappointment when today's announcement finally came, even though many businesses and politicians had been fearing it for some time. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, tonight accused the government of being self-serving. He said his region is entitled to better. Our North of England reporter Amy Welch heard the reaction.
This railway line is going to come across here.
In the heart of the Cheshire countryside, HS2 has meant a decade of heartache for the Daniel family.
It was a house I was going to live in for the rest of my life. It won't be now, will it?
They were forced to sell their family home of 65 years and now rent it from HS2 instead.
What really upsets us is when they come to value it, one valuer came round and said, well, I just googled this property and it's worth nothing because HS2 are coming through it.
A mile down the road, HS2 didn't want Jeremy's house, but he's worried no one else will either.
When I come to sell, I would find it profoundly difficult to entice a purchaser who would always be concerned that someone might revive HS2.
So this is the MDF that's come from Germany on a lorry.
HS2 was meant to open doors between the north and the south, but now it's been shelved. This door factory in Rochdale will have to resort to roads rather than rail. How devastating is this HS2 decision for your business?
It's massively devastating. What I wanted was high-speed trains for passengers and the existing train tracks to then be carrying the heavy goods of the 800,000 lorries that are going up and down our roads every day.
£36 billion will instead be reinvested in better transport links between all northern cities.
If they're going to make a lot of investments into the roads, into buses, also connecting the northern cities, I think that can bring a lot of opportunities also.
Travelling up north is a bit of a pain, so if they do that, that would be amazing, because it's not amazingly connected up here.
But Manchester's mayor says this can't be yet another broken promise.
And I think today's announcement and the manner in which it's been done will only build that feeling across the north that actually, no, we've had enough of this. We're not being treated like this anymore.
And after so much disappointment, what commuters want now is a transport plan that's crystal clear. Amy Welch, ITV News, Manchester.
OK, well, let's get more reaction now from our correspondents. John Hill is in Leeds, where an eastern leg of HS2 had already been cancelled. Rebecca Barry is at London Euston, HS2's eventual southern terminus, or at least that was the plan. And our deputy political editor, Anushka Astana, is at Manchester Piccadilly, where HS2 will now never arrive. Well, let's go to John first. And John, a mixed reception then to today's announcements.
I think that's right, Mary. I mean, Leeds already knew, as you say, that it wasn't going to get the Yorkshire leg of HS2, but Labour leaders have been quick to accuse the government, Labour leaders in the region, of letting down the whole of the north. But Rishi Sunak says, well, I'll be spending instead billions of pounds in the Yorkshire transport system, so there'll be money for a Leeds tram service. Now, Leeds is in fact the largest city in Europe not to have a mass transit system. That would perhaps relieve congestion that you see behind me, and potentially and eventually, says the government, that could lead to a mass transit system between Leeds and Halifax, Huddersfield, Bradford and Wakefield. But that's a potentially and eventually, and these schemes have been proposed before. Labour scrapped one in 2005, so people here could be forgiven for thinking they've heard it before.
It had been thought that under Rishi Sunak's new plans, HS2 trains might not even reach here in central London. They could terminate further out in West London. But today the Prime Minister confirmed that they will run here into Euston. There's already been substantial work on this flagship site, but in February all work here was paused because costs had spiralled from 2.6 billion to 4.8 billion. Now the government says that the development of this site will be stripped back, saving billions of pounds, which it says will be reinvested in other parts of the country. For example, the station planned here was due to have 11 platforms for high-speed trains. It will now have just 6. And Rishi Sunak says that HS2 management will no longer have responsibility for the Euston site here because he says there must be some accountability for the mistakes made.
OK, Rebecca Barry at London Euston, thank you. Now, all week, the question of HS2's Birmingham to Manchester leg has hung over the party conference. We reported on Monday, you probably remember, that Rishi Sunak had already resolved to scrap the scheme. But Downing Street again repeated no final decisions had been made. Strange, then, that a video of the Prime Minister explaining the move was released immediately after his Manchester speech, but filmed in Downing Street several days ago.
We're launching Network North, a new plan for transport that will transform roads, rails and buses across the North and the Midlands. How are we able to do this? Because I'm stopping all phases of HS2 beyond Birmingham.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Anushka Astana, is at Manchester Piccadilly Station, as I said. Anushka, this is awkward, clearly. Does it matter, really?
Well, I think it is awkward. They still insist that the final decision was today, but it's clear from that video that it was always going that way. So why then did they allow the negative bit of this argument, that high-speed rail was never coming here to Manchester Piccadilly, as you said, to dominate for 2 days, without putting forward the positive side of it? Critics of the Prime Minister say it's a sign of weakness. His supporters say he wanted to wait, set out his vision in the big speech.